This is Coaching Club TV. I'm Tremaine to Preez, and for our year-end Coach to Coach, we have something really special in store for you. With me, I have the current president of the Professional Speaking Association here in London, an award-winning BBC broadcaster, and someone who helps speakers to make their content more engaging and more entertaining. Also, one of the most popular after-dinner speakers in the UK at the moment. Jeremy Nicholas, thank you very much for being here with us.
You're very welcome, Tremaine. I live here, so thank you for coming to my house. And to make it more entertaining, I have this prop, which is Jimmy Choo, and he's 5, and he's a Bichon Frise, and he promises to keep quiet as long as he can sit on my lap. Well, there has to be a point to it. I think whenever you're interviewing someone, you think, what do you want to get out of it? And when you're being interviewed, you've got to think, what point do I want to get across? So I do quite a lot of media training with people, and I'll say whatever they ask you, answer the question, but also add the information that you want to get out there. Maybe make a list of the 5 questions you think you're going to be asked, and then the 10 points you want to get across, whatever they ask.
What else can we do while we're preparing for interviews, especially high-pressure interviews where we might feel that we're not necessarily in control of the interview ourselves?
What you should do beforehand is maybe chat to a few friends and say, what do you think they'll ask me? Because you might think of 5 things that you're expecting to be asked, but your friends will always come up with real curveballs. You think, oh, I'm not expecting that, I better think of something. Because what you don't want to be done is go, I don't really know. Yes, come back to me on that. No, you're live now on the radio. So
now that does happen. What do we do when we may know the answer, and I've done it before, I just go blank?
What politicians will do is they'll say something like, well, let's be clear about this. Okay. Now, whenever they say let's be clear, what they mean is, I can't think what to say, I'm just thinking, let's be clear. Oh, yes, I know. Okay. So it might be good to have a little phrase that you roll out that gives you a bit of thinking time. But what you need to think about is, what examples can you give? So one technique is called PREP, P-R-E-P. The P stands for position, the R is the reason it's your position, the E is the hard bit, giving an example that illustrates that, and then lastly the P is restate your position. Okay. So if I say to you about anything, what do you think about this? You'll say, my position is this, R the reason, here's an example that illustrates that, so that's why that's my position.
You've been on both sides of many interviews, I have no doubt. What are some of the worst things that have happened, and how have you rescued the situation?
So I've been a poacher and a gamekeeper. Okay. I interviewed Christopher Lee once. I don't know if you know Christopher Lee, but he was in a lot of horror films. He played Dracula. Yes, very scary man. He was also in Lord of the Rings, where he played the villain, the Dark Lord Sauron. And I interviewed him when he was promoting the film Lord of the Rings, and it was on BBC London Radio, the afternoon show. And he came on, and I kept asking him about Dracula, because I like Dracula. And he kept saying, I'd like to talk more about Lord of the Rings. So I went back to Lord of the Rings, but my producer started writing up little notes that come up on my screen in front of me, saying, ask him more about Dracula. It's funny when he gets upset. So I asked him a bit more about Dracula. He got a little bit upset, like, well, I'd like to talk more about this. And the producer starts writing, people are ringing in saying, more Dracula, it's very funny. So I said, you've played Dracula. And he said, well, it's just one part that I've played many parts. I said, yeah, but you have played it in 13 different films. Well, yes, that is true, but I think I'm known as an actor. And he was quite sort of, not wanting to talk about it. But still, the people were ringing in. The producer was putting all the people's comments that were ringing in about more Dracula, more Dracula. And at the end of the interview, I got up to say goodbye to him. And I walked around his side of the desk and noticed that the screen, his side, had been left on by mistake, and he'd seen all of the questions coming up. So that was a bit of a nightmare. So if you're ever in that kind of situation, make sure that no one can see your questions. Sometimes when I've interviewed people on radio, guests have come in and they said, oh, here are the questions to ask me. And that's the worst thing you can do, because no one, that's PR. If I'm a journalist, that's an affront to me that someone's going to say these are the questions. So I would just turn that over and write my own questions on it. Because also, any kind of interview, it's a bit of give and take. Yeah. So, you invited me onto your coaching channel, and I think that's fine. What will I get out of it? I'll get a chance to promote my coaching services, and that's a little bit, and that's the game, isn't it? But in return, I have to answer your questions. I can't say you can only ask me about my one-day masterclass or my book or whatever. because you're not here to advertise me. You're here to make sure that people who watch your channel get some value. So that's it. The interviewee has to give value, and in return they get a chance to do a bit of promoting. But sometimes interviewees just want to promote, and that's no good.
Let's talk about those masterclasses. So you help people be more memorable, more entertaining, but primarily by being funnier.
Yes, so there's the original Talking Toolbox Masterclass, which is about being entertaining and engaging. And my big thing is that I coach a lot of speakers, and they might be professional speakers, they might be people who work in whatever industry that have to just stand up in front of a group at some point. It could be the chief finance officer who has to present the annual return to the conference. And what a lot of speakers, particularly in the UK, are they do lots of informing and lots of educating, and they don't do much entertaining. Now, the reason I pick inform, educate, entertain is because that's the values of the BBC. When the BBC started in the 1920s, the original Director General, Lord Reith, said, "We're here to inform, educate and entertain." And I just think speakers forget the entertaining bit. If you entertain them, at least they're listening. I always say if they're laughing, they're listening. Big thing. So that's the Talking Toolbox Masterclass, and the thing I'm launching for 2017 is the Talking Funny Masterclass, which is specifically about adding humour. Because lots of people, I had previously done it as a half-an-hour section in the one-day session, and people said, well, that's the bit we really want. So I'm now doing that as an extra course, specifically on how to be funny. And the big things from that are pause. If you say something funny, pause, so that you give people permission to laugh and room to laugh. Because otherwise you say something funny and then people laugh and then they miss the next bit if you haven't stopped. So they don't ever laugh again. And just little things like saying things in threes. Everyone knows joke structures where something normal happens, something else normal happens, and the third thing is something completely off the wall. You know, it could be three men going into a pub. First one does something, the second one does something in a similar way, and the third one does something that completely subverts that pattern.
Unexpected.
Yeah. So lots of speakers know the rule of three, but for humorous speaking, the third one better be the funny one.
Now, talking about books, there is something coming out from you next year, long awaited? Long awaited,
yes. So I've written 3 books so far. I wrote a book on how to appear on the media, which is called Media Masters. I co-wrote with Alan Stevens. Then I wrote an autobiography about my time as the stadium announcer at West Ham called Mr. Moon Has Left the Stadium, which turns out to be the same as the safety message at the stadium. So when I then promoted it on the pitch at half-time, the stewards thought there was a safety alert, and I could never do that again. Then I wrote an e-book, which is called 1,000,000 Tips on Public Speaking, brackets, Volume 1, because clearly there aren't 1,000,000 tips in there, and I didn't want to be sued. And then the new one that comes out next year is called Talking Toolbox, and that is all about being entertaining and engaging when speaking in public. And so it covers basically the 4 things to worry about in any presentation. I think the 4 things are you, the audience, the message, and how you deliver it. And most presentation skills courses are all about the delivery. And I think the most important thing is the message, because they'll forgive you if you've got a great message if you're not a great presenter, but they'll never forgive you if you're really slick but you just waste their time because your message isn't important. What I would also suggest is sign up for my newsletter, which is always packed with tips on how to be a better speaker, and you can get that jeremynicholas.co.uk.
Perfect, and I highly recommend that newsletter. This has been Coaching Club TV. Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
That was entertaining, informing and engaging.
Great.
Yes. So we'll see you next year in January with our next Coach to Coach. I'm Tremaine Preez, and I'm an executive coach, and I speak on critical thinking in decision making.